Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Tianlu. Coming up in this edition. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has formally secured the Democratic nomination for the presidency. British authorities have been facing growing pressure to put an end to England's worst rioting in 13 years. And Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has said the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was intended to prolong the conflict in Gaza. We begin from the Americas. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is now officially the Democratic presidential nominee. Her party confirmed her on Monday after 5 days of online balloting. She has now become the first woman of color on the top of a major party ticket in the United States. Harris will soon kick off a multi-state tour. She plans to visit 7 battleground states before the Democratic National Convention in 2 weeks. With the presidential campaign heating up, polls show migration remains a crucial issue for voters. The U.S. southern border is still under pressure from a migrant influx. Mexico has stepped up its efforts to deter migrants from reaching the U.S. border. Alastair Beverstock has more.
The Suchiate River, where Guatemala ends and Mexico begins, a barrier US-bound migrants must cross on their journey north. Luis Arias and his family left Venezuela just 2 weeks ago, but as they step onto Mexican soil for the first time, they know onward progress may now not be so swift.
They say
it isn't easy in Mexico. There are cartels, kidnappers, and migration authorities. And even if you reach the border, you can get sent all the way back to here.
As migrants like Luis battle their way through the southern limits of North America, they are in the political spotlight across the entire continent.
To protect America as a land that welcomes immigrants, we must first secure the border and secure it now. This ban will remain in place until the number of people trying to enter illegally is reduced to a level that our system can effectively manage.
Millions of people will continue pouring in, and they're coming right through the border like they have never come through before. What he signed means nothing.
I'll send a letter to my friend Donald Trump because I think he's not being well informed about the immigration issue.
Amid a US 2024 US presidential campaign with migration as a major issue, Mexican enforcement is playing a key role. While Mexico has pledged to limit the number of undocumented arrivals at the US border to 4,000 a day, government data show that Mexico's own southern border, more than 7,000 migrants are crossing into this country from Guatemala on a daily basis. With that crush of people joining the migrant trail on the banks of the Suchiate every day, Mexican authorities are overwhelmed as they try to relieve the bottleneck.
I've seen large quantities of migrants, Venezuelans, Haitians, Cubans, Ecuadorians from all over. We're waiting on buses to take us north, but we could be here for days or weeks.
It's more than 1,800 kilometres through Mexico to the closest US port of entry, a route made ever more challenging in this US election year.
That was Alastair Beverstock reporting from Mexico. Turning to Europe, British authorities have been facing growing pressure to put an end to England's worst rioting in 13 years. Violent protests have spread to multiple towns and cities following misinformation about a mass stabbing that killed 3 young girls in July. Earlier, Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the unrest far-right thuggery and vowed to bring violent offenders to justice. Ian Copestake reports from Rotherham, a town in South Yorkshire that has seen some of the worst aggression in the past few days.
This Holiday Inn in Rotherham was attacked on Sunday by an estimated 700 people. It housed 240 asylum seekers. They have all been moved to safe accommodation. Locals reported that the rioters pulled up fences from their gardens to use as projectiles. Wheelie bins were set on fire and launched at the hotel. Terrified hotel staff barricaded themselves into the hotel using fridges and other furniture to try and keep the attackers out. 4 asylum seekers who returned to the accommodation while the violence was taking place spent the night sleeping in a local forest. The local council has worked through the night and into the day with a team of 100 volunteers to clear up the debris left from the attack. The UK Defence Secretary John Healey, who is also a local MP here in South Yorkshire, has been to the site and was here to support people on Sunday.
I was here yesterday with the backup teams, police, ambulance. The team that came in and helped get the staff out and move the residents to places of safety as the violence started to calm down. I mean, you can see for yourselves here, this is devastating. This was an area that was seized with shock and fear throughout yesterday. The staff and residents here barricaded in the hotel as people were breaking the windows, trying to set fire to the hotel.
Now, the Defence Secretary said he would not be bringing in the army to quell any further violence here. He said that the police have the means at their disposal to deal with the situation. He said that while there were some legitimate concerns as to why this hotel housed asylum seekers for 3 years in a residential neighbourhood, that nothing justified the level of thuggery or violence that was seen at the weekend. He said the full force of the law would come down on those responsible and to expect many more arrests in connection with the rioting.
That was Ian Cope's take on the widespread anti-immigration protests in the UK. In the Middle East, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was intended to prolong the conflict in Gaza. Abbas made the statement to Russia's state news agency. The Palestinian president added that Haniyeh's assassination will complicate ceasefire talks. Meantime, Israeli airstrikes are continuing in Gaza. Health authorities say at least 8 people were killed on Monday. Akram Al-Satari has more from Gaza.
Well, Israel has been targeting different places throughout the Gaza Strip, from the Gaza North to Gaza City, Gaza Central area, Khan Yunis and Rafah, and it has been targeting the symbols of governors, the symbols of control that are seen as strongholds for Hamas and signs of strength for Hamas. The Azra'i is one of them. He was the deputy minister of Ministry of Economics and National Economy in Gaza. He was visiting his mother, and the attack took his life and that of his mother. According to the Israeli sources in the Israeli media, they were saying that he is the one in charge of providing the Palestinian resistance with fuel and also with financial resources to continue the resistance against Israel. They have also targeted a vehicle that is run by the police, and they killed 8 policemen. It looks like it is an attempt to continue targeting any sign of control by Hamas and also to leave the whole Gaza Strip for the full chaos that has been controlling the Gaza Strip.
That was Akram Al-Satari reporting. Elsewhere in the Middle East, the Lebanese Health Ministry has reported that Israeli strikes killed 3 people in the south of the country. The Israeli army stated that soldiers identified a terrorist cell operating a drone in southern Lebanon, and air forces struck and eliminated the terrorists. Meantime, Lebanon has received a first aid shipment from the WHO as the threat of war escalates. Zahra Al-Derzi has more.
On Monday morning, Lebanon received the first shipment of aid from the World Health Organization. The shipment that arrived at Beirut International Airport contained 32 tons of medicines and health supplies to respond to emergencies as the threats of war on Lebanon escalated.
Our responsibility is to ensure that we have, emergency supplies and trauma kits across all the referral hospitals in the country. We are working very closely with the Minister of Health as well as other partners to facilitate and to ensure that these supplies are ready for any eventuality. And I think that is a testimony of what we see today, that we have received this consignment of trauma kits, just to ensure we have enough kits that will help treat at least over 1,000 trauma patients and even more.
The WHO representative in Lebanon, Abdul Nasser Abu Bakr, stressed during the delivery that the UN body is working with the Ministry of Health to respond to a state of emergency and will provide more supplies if needed.
Our responsibility is to ensure that we have, emergency supplies and trauma kits, all the referral hospitals in the country. And we are working very closely with the Minister of Health as well as other partners to facilitate and to ensure that these supplies are ready for any eventuality. And I think that is testimony of what we see today, that we have received this cargo who are bringing large consignment of trauma kits just to ensure in Lebanon we do have supplies, we do have enough kits that will manage at least over 1,000 trauma patients even more.
The Ministry of Health also emphasized the message of the Lebanese government that Lebanon does not want war. Still, the health authorities will respond to the Israeli assault, calling their international partners to pressure Israel to stop its attacks and demanding a ceasefire in Gaza and southern Lebanon. Abiad also emphasized on the illegality of attacking medical and ambulance crews and health institutions, which is guaranteed by international treaties and international laws. 2 paramedics were killed in an Israeli airstrike on southern Lebanon on Monday morning. On Monday, Hezbollah announced that it had launched an attack with a squadron of swooping drones on the 91st Division's new headquarters in the Elite Barracks, the Malikiya Post, and the Ramim Barracks in northern Israel.
That was Zahra El-Derzi reporting from Beirut. In Asia, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called for calm and restraint in Bangladesh. He also called for the formation of a democratic interim government. This came after the resignation of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and the military's announcement of plans to form an interim government. Large crowds gathered on Monday in defiance of a nationwide curfew. They have been protesting the controversial government drop quotas that many deem as unfair to the general public. Ravinder Bawa has details.
Angry protesters took to the streets on Monday in the capital city of Bangladesh, demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Thousands of protesters marched towards the city before Hasina fled the country. Moments after Hasina left the country, visuals of crowds storming her official residence were all over local TV channels. They were seen shouting slogans, pumping fists, and showing signs of victory. The chief of the army asked the protesters to return home peacefully.
I take responsibility and I promise to protect the lives and property of the people. Don't lose faith in the army. God willing, we will fulfill your demands.
Over 300 people have been killed in protests that have engulfed Bangladesh for the past month. Protesters have been demanding the scrapping of a controversial quota system in government jobs.
How can the government run these attacks? It's a matter of common sense that over 50% of the jobs cannot be given away to quota holders. A normal state cannot be run like this.
Protests began after the High Court reinstated the quota system for government jobs, overturning a 2018 decision by Hasina's government to scrap it. The government had appealed against the verdict in the Supreme Court to suspend the High Court order, with the hearing scheduled for Wednesday. But after the explosive turn of events over recent days, there are serious doubts it will go ahead.
That was Ravinder Bawa reporting. Now recapping today's headlines. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has formally secured the Democratic nomination for the presidency. British authorities have been facing growing pressure to put an end to England's worst rioting in 13 years. And Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has said the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was intended to prolong the conflict in Gaza. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Tianlu. Thank you for listening.